Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing good. And thank you for watching as usual. I definitely hope everyone's doing well. And of course, like the video if you like it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. And feel free to let me know in the comments, what you think, or if you have any ideas or thoughts or anything like that. So um, I want to talk a little bit about um, who has access to Earth. Like, for example, from the spiritual realms. So what I mean is, the question came up because I was talking to um, my spiritual guides, which is actually that's kind of funny. That's a whole nother video right there. So basically, I was talking to them all at once. Um, so okay, so real quick, I'll throw that in there. I actually learned so at a certain point, it was like a few years back. I'm like, well, who's here to guide you? Basically, like, do you get one person? Do you get like 10 people? Does that have to be an angel? They're different beings for different belief systems. And the answer was, well, really anybody. You can ask anybody. There's no just one person. There's no just one being. So I was like, cool. Can I get all of them? So um, that's kind of how I started doing it. And I was like, I just want to talk to all of them. Can I just have all of them? Why not? Why not have them all? So just for fun and to get to meet more people and that sort of thing. So there's no limit. Remember, infinity itself literally means without limits. So, or without end. So the amount of angels or guides or people from Earth too that are willing to help you out and that sort of stuff. Um, it's really up to you to define that number. So usually when I say spiritual guides, I mean like a lot. So a lot of people. So that being said, I was talking to him and I was curious, like, because I was watching other psychic videos about, and a lot of them say, well, your loved ones are watching over you. And I was like, well, what does that mean exactly, you guys? Like, so it started this conversation back and forth. I was like, because I just don't want people like following me around at home, like watching everything I do. And I don't even want them following me at the grocery store. I'm like, you guys are weird. Are you just like watching me everywhere I go? Like, were you doing this before I became, started practicing psychic abilities? Like, you just go around watching everybody. It's kind of weird, you guys. Like, don't be weird, So I told them, we had this conversation back and forth. It was actually really funny, but so there are rules and limitations to that sort of thing. So no, people are not just allowed to follow you, and not just anybody can view Earth, especially if they were once from here. So those that are allowed to observe and assist, there is a front line. There's a group. There are rules and many organizations that actually kind of oversee that sort of thing. So public versus private is a very important distinction to make. So unless you specifically give permission to even talk to like a spiritual being or one of your friends or loved ones or family members that's in the afterlife, they need permission to be able to be in your home. And even then, there's rules about where they can stand and speak and that sort of thing. It's very much controlled. So here's an important point to point out too. So that's not to say people don't see beings and souls and stuff walking around everywhere. And I'm not denying them that experience, but it's not something that is allowed or even happens from the spiritual realms, believe it or not. So our souls, there's just like a sea of energy around us at all times, and it can constantly interact with each other. And even it's like when we dream and things are happening within our heads and outside our control, we're just kind of observing it. Our information can kind of escape and interact, and it's very fluid, non-physical fields of energy that can create these experiences that people see and hear. So it's real, like if you see like a ghost haunting your house, for example, that sort of thing. But it's nothing from the afterlife, nothing that was sent here, nothing that was allowed to get through or couldn't be stopped. It's a very strict process, and it's usually self-generated, whether we realize it or not. So So that's not to say that, people don't have these experiences. I have too, but now I kind of have a more clear understanding about what they are and how they happen. Um, so back to Earth, as far as like who watches over you. Um, I was asking too. Well, you guys just can't, you can't just follow people around everywhere. That's not cool. So it's kept to public areas. People can, like your loved ones, for example, can observe you in public areas. Say you're at the park or at a grocery store, or somewhere that you might, bump into someone anyways, which makes it allowed. So, but I still told them, you guys, like, it's kind of weird, like, especially if you're not aware. It seems like most people are fine with that. There's a really good answer though for this too. I'll tell you in a second, but like, this is weird. I just don't want to be like going to the grocery store or like outside smoking a cigarette or like just thinking, all my dead grandparents are just staring at me like all the time. It's like, can you guys back away? Like, especially with an awareness of that sort of thing. And I'm like, who else is watching us too? I just don't want like everybody. It's kind of different when you're at the store or at a park or something, and there's a lot of people, and you're looking at people, and they're looking around. But it's different to just think that there's even more sets of eyes of you just watching it everywhere you go. So even that's handled in the careful manner. That goes through a process as well, depending on the cultural kind of standards of the people involved in the country you're at, for example. Angels are a very well-known species of spiritual beings, or race, if you will, and they are basically trusted and known by most people to be good, in other words, in the Abrahamic religion. So you're not going to find like demons, for example, from the Bible, guiding your grandparents around the grocery store while you buy like eggs. So, but in certain parts of the world, like in Japan, their belief systems have good demons, like nature spirits and that sort of thing. So when they are part of the good aspect of the psyche, then it's allowed. So that's another consideration there. Also, people, they have to have a certain connection to you, some kind of connection to you, in other words, to be observed. So don't worry. Everybody in the afterlife is not watching your every single move down here. So it has to be a direct and clear connection. And not only that, by the way, I was going to mention too, so not beyond that direct connection, not everyone has this ability. Like many people who are on Earth, if they did things, like if they're evil, say they're a dictator, or they killed like a ton of people, or they did evil things, they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to observe people they know, friends or family or anybody down here. They lose that right. They don't have the ability to do that. They can communicate with someone down here, but it would have to go through like a medium or a psychic. They don't just have free reign of Earth. It's just a rule because of what they did. So it's more carefully handled, but it's not shut off completely. It just has to go through a clear source. Last point I kind of wanted to, it's very nuanced too. There's a lot of different rules I didn't realize because, I've heard this before too for years, just, your loved ones are watching over you, or, you're watched over by the angels and that sort of thing. Turns out it's not so simple. So it turns out there's a lot of rules and considerations. And it's very interesting trying to learn this, and I love to be able to share that too. So the other thing is, even if you're not aware, or even if you never run into, say, a psychic or never have spiritual experiences, and you just kind of assume, my loved ones are watching over me. They are, to a limited degree. But even then, it's carefully handled. So they are, because if you get there, once you arrive at the afterlife, and you're like, you know what, I kind of thought you guys were watching me everywhere I go, but um, that's weird. That you guys did that. It's understood that if they're able to observe you in public areas and where it's allowed and that sort of thing, once you get there and they understand your position on it, these sorts of experiences can be deleted. So it's like kind of signing up with an awareness. Like, say, um, I die and I enter the afterlife, and then one of my friends is down here, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I know that person. Uh, can I just check on them? Want to see how they're doing? They're driving around in their car. Oh, that's great. They got a new car. Looks like they got a new job. So you can kind of observe them in public, that sort of thing. But you do that with the understanding beforehand that they can actually delete this once you get there. Like for to use kind of like an analogy, so kind of like delete the experience or the awareness. So it's like here's like a good analogy. It's like you're plugging into the Matrix, for example, and you're allowed to view and see certain things. But once they get there and say like, well, no, I don't want that. I don't like that you guys are even to observe me, even in public. You will have to delete that experience and delete that to respect their wishes. So it's not like people can just infringe upon, even in like outdoor public areas, your ability for privacy and freedom, that sort of thing. So remember, in infinity, in the afterlife, of course, infinite life, infinite possibility. So these things are possible. Anything you can imagine, once we're over there, these sorts of experiences can be accommodated. And every single aspect and possibility of our well-being and privacy is taken into account from the other side. So I thought it really fascinating and kind of paints an interesting picture of, how this place is viewed and observed from the other side. And we'll be there too someday, and we'll, have access to these kinds of experiences and that sort of thing. So just want to share that. I thought it was interesting. And as I continue to kind of ask these questions and get answers, I'll definitely share it because I find it fascinating. And it makes sense, like I was saying earlier, a lot of times when we hear these things, we kind of leave it at that. So I like to ask a lot of questions personally. So when something comes up, I'll usually continue to explore it. Like, oh, your loved ones watch over you, and I'm like, well, that's great. And then I think about it, and I'm like everywhere. Like I don't want just anybody walking around my my home, or like what about like if I'm at the beach? I don't want just people watching me at the beach. Like swimming. Put on weight and I'm running around. I don't want people I'm not aware of just staring at me all the time, even if it's angels and you guys just you just stare at me all the time. You guys are kind of weird, so I ask these questions and to get the answers, and it's interesting because on one hand it's simple, but there's a million questions to ask, and there's an answer for each one of them. Anyways, I hope you found that interesting. And if you have any thoughts or questions too, let me know. I'd love to ask and see what I can get back and share. So I think it's really good stuff, and I love exploring these ideas and being able to share information, especially questions that don't always often get asked, and should, I think. And so we can kind of have a greater understanding of how everything works. So thanks again. Much appreciated. And as always, take care. And we'll see you later.